The Adventures of Charcoal, The Magic Beyond Episode 10, The Eternal Ice Ocean. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support us. Ready? Let's dive in. The wind had vanished. The once whispering voice of the sea that caressed the Ethereon's sails had fallen into utter silence, leaving behind only an eerie, suffocating stillness. The waves no longer stirred. The surface of the ocean had darkened, transforming into a glassy abyss that reflected only the ship's shadow as it drifted aimlessly forward. And then, before them, the eternal ice ocean revealed itself, a vast, unbroken expanse of ice stretched as far as the eye could see, resembling an impenetrable fortress sealing away all life from the outside world. Snowflakes drifted down from the heavens, yet eerily they made no sound upon touching the frozen landscape. Colossal ice pillars jutted out from the sea, their frosted surfaces forming a labyrinth of frozen monoliths that surrounded them on all sides. The moonlight shimmered against the thick sheets of ice, casting a silver glow across the frozen expanse. Yet beneath its breathtaking beauty lurked a biting cold that sank deep into the bones, devouring warmth with every breath. Every exhale turned into a misty wisp, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, stolen away by the relentless chill of this forsaken land. "Wow, this is..." A loud bark shattered the silence. Charcoal leaped onto the ship's railing, tail wagging furiously, his dark eyes gleaming with uncontained excitement. His sleek black fur stood in stark contrast against the dazzling white landscape. He stretched his snout forward, inhaling the crisp, frigid air with an eager sniff. "It's all white. It's freezing. I love it." "Charcoal, be careful." Myst's warning came too late. The little pup had already sprung onto the edge of the ship, his small paws nearly slipping over the rail. His body leaned forward, about to launch himself into the icy terrain below, until Ray's strong arms snatched him midair. "You little troublemaker!" Ray scolded, gripping him tightly. "Do you even realize how close you were to falling?" Charcoal wriggled slightly in his grasp, his front paws batting at Ray's arm in protest. "But I just wanted to see. I've never seen anything like this before. It looks like clouds on the ground." "Clouds aren't made of ice," Luna remarked dryly, her emerald eyes locked onto something below. She flicked her tail slightly, a subtle expression of unease. Then she fell completely silent. Beneath the thick layer of frozen water, something was stirring. The ice, which should have been solid for eternity, rippled. A shadow slithered beneath the surface, moving unnaturally, watching them. "Quiet," Luna whispered, her ears standing erect, sharp and alert. Charcoal immediately stilled. His ears twitched. A deep growl rumbled from his throat. The darkness beneath the ice was not random. It was shifting, circling, observing. Ray's brow furrowed, his body instinctively tensing. A chilling sensation crawled up his spine, a primal warning echoing in his mind. This was more than just a cursed land. This was a trap. "It feels like we're being watched." His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight that pressed down upon them all. Myst stepped forward, the hem of her dark cloak barely brushing the deck. Raising her hand, violet energy flickered to life at her fingertips, forming thin, swirling threads of magic. Slowly, she extended them into the mist, trying to grasp at the unseen forces lingering in the air. And then, the magic rebounded. A sudden force surged back at her. Myst staggered, her heels digging into the wooden planks as she clenched her jaw. The glow of her eyes sharpened. "Something is holding us back." And then, a sound. A low, rasping exhale. Ray turned his head sharply as he felt Charcoal stiffen against him. The little pup's eyes were locked onto the ice below. His fur bristled, tail frozen mid-motion, muscles coiling like a spring about to snap. He sucked in a deep breath, then let loose a deafening bark. "Get out of here!" His voice rang across the frozen expanse, tearing through the unnatural silence. It was a declaration of defiance, a battle cry against whatever unseen force lurked beneath the ice. But there was no echo, no response. His bark vanished. It was as if the very air had swallowed it whole. Charcoal faltered, his ears perking higher, his breathing quickening. The realization struck him. Something was here. Something powerful. A shiver ran down his spine. He took a step back, his gaze snapping to raise, his voice steadier now, filled with unwavering resolve. "Stay away from my pack." His growl deepened. His golden eyes burned with determination. Even though the mist offered no reply, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, colder. Ray placed a firm hand on Charcoal's head, whispering softly, "Good. Don't be afraid." But when he lifted his gaze, the mist was shifting. It parted, unraveling like ghostly hands pulling back a veil, and what lay beyond made them all forget to breathe. A glacial wind howled across the frozen ocean, its chilling breath whispering like the long-forgotten cries of the forsaken, echoing softly in the void of silence. The Etherian came to an abrupt halt, not from anchoring, nor from the absence of wind, but as if an unseen force had severed it from the flow of time itself. The sails, once billowing freely, now stood stiff and motionless, bound by an invisible grip. Even the familiar creaking of the ship's wooden beams had ceased, swallowed by an eerie stillness. All that remained was the haunting wail of the wind, a wind that did not merely bring cold, but a creeping frost that seeped into the very soul. Before them lay the eternal ice ocean, a vast expanse of unbroken white stretching into infinity. It was silent, lifeless, or so it seemed. Yet beneath its frozen surface, something stirred. Thud, thud, thud. A muffled sound echoed beneath the ice, not the cracking of frozen sheets, nor the shifting of the ocean's depths, but footsteps. The sound of something moving beneath this frozen world. Beneath the moonlit ice, faint silhouettes began to emerge. They remained still, unmoving, as if frozen mid-motion by some ancient sorcery. But as they stared deeper, they saw shapes. They saw bodies. Ray took a cautious step forward, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his sword. A primal warning tingled at the back of his mind, whispering of unseen danger. His throat went dry as he swallowed hard. His gaze locked onto one particular shadow beneath the crystalline surface, and in that moment, he saw it. A man, entombed beneath the ice. His skin was pale, almost bluish, drained of warmth by centuries of frost. His outstretched hand was frozen mid-reach, as if he had been grasping for something just before the moment of his doom. But his most haunting feature, his eyes were wide open. He was not dead. He was watching. Ray took a sharp step back, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cold that surrounded him no longer felt like mere weather. It was a force, an entity, something that did not just freeze the body, but reached into the marrow of existence itself. Then, a whisper slithered through the wind, its voice neither male nor female, a formless murmur that resonated around them. "Turn back, before it is too late." The voice did not come from the frozen figures beneath them. It was all around them. Charcoal tensed. His sleek black fur bristled, his tail stiffened, and a deep, low growl rumbled in his throat. "I don't like this place." His voice was barely above a whisper, but his stance was rigid with unease. He took a step back, instinct driving him closer to Ray while his amber eyes remained fixed on the ice below. His every fiber told him that they were not alone. Myst moved forward, her violet gaze glowing with magic as she reached out, sensing the unseen forces lingering in the air. The energy here was thick, suffocating, as if something was actively refusing to let them pass. "They were never fully frozen," she murmured, her voice edged with restrained dread. "They still Feel. She peered deeper into the ice, at the countless figures trapped beneath its surface, hundreds, maybe thousands, all captured in their final moments, frozen between life and death. "They are not dead," Luna's voice was barely a whisper. She stepped forward, her silver fur glimmering beneath the moonlight. But the cold here was not merely the cold of nature. It was the cold of something that still lingers, something that still breathes. "They are imprisoned." Then the whispers ceased, and the shadows beneath the ice moved. A faint crack splintered through the frozen surface. "Everyone, step back." Ray's voice was low, steady but firm. But before they could react, a second crack. A fine web of fractures spread across the ice, creeping outward like veins, tracing jagged patterns across the translucent surface. The frozen ground beneath their feet shuddered ever so slightly. Something was waking up, and it no longer wanted them to turn back. The sound of ice cracking still echoed through the frozen abyss, like the world itself was crying out in agony. The breath of the eternal ice ocean was faint, yet it carried an invisible power, something ancient, something watchful. The mist that shrouded them trembled, as if it were alive, waiting for fate to be decided. And then it appeared. Amidst the raging snowstorm, a figure began to take shape from a faint blue light. Glowing fragments of frost drifted through the air like snowflakes catching the moonlight, slowly converging into the form of a being that watched them from above. He was the Ice Guardian. His towering figure loomed like an ancient monolith of ice, sculpted not from mere flesh or stone, but from the very essence of frozen magic. His translucent body gleamed like crystal, reflecting the pale light of the moon, and beneath his frozen skin, veins of luminous blue light pulsed, like frozen lifeblood trapped in time. The cloak draped over his shoulders was woven from mist and storm, shifting with the wind, yet never dispersing. Faint, glowing runes shimmered across its surface, whispers of a forgotten age buried beneath the snow. And his eyes, they burned with an eerie blue glow, not just with power, but with something deeper, something heavier. They carried the weight of a tragedy untold, an eternity of waiting, and a curse that could never be undone. His gaze pierced through them, not as a mere living being, but as one who had once lived and lost everything. "This place." His voice was as cold as the breath of time itself, carried through the wind from a past long forgotten. "Is a trap of time." A single sentence, yet their breaths grew heavy. The ice beneath their feet turned colder. A force, unseen yet crushing, made even the act of breathing feel like an impossible burden. This was not mere cold, this was the presence of the ocean's will, watching them. "Who are you?" Ray's voice was low, wary. His fingers inched toward the hilt of his sword, but something deep inside told him a weapon was useless here. The Ice Guardian merely stared, his frozen face emotionless as his voice echoed through the air, reverberating as if it had risen from beneath the frozen sea itself. "I am the guardian of this land." His words sliced through the silence like the wind through glacial peaks, carrying their weight across the void. "I am the last remnant of those who once dared to challenge the eternal ice ocean and had everything taken from them." There was no emotion, no resentment, only the cold truth, still and unmoving. Charcoal let out a low growl, his black fur bristling, his tail was still, his body tense, every instinct screaming of unseen danger. "He's not an enemy," Myst said in an even tone, though her violet eyes never wavered from the Guardian's. "But he's not a friend either." "If you wish to move forward," the Guardian continued, "you must prove yourselves." "Prove what?" Myst's voice was steady, her gaze sharp as ice. The Guardian's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, a smile not of amusement, but of knowing, of wisdom earned through sorrow. "Can you survive? if there are no voices to guide you? The trial began, and the silence devoured everything. The trial of silence. In an instant, the world was swallowed by silence. All sound ceased. The wind that once howled was now mute. Their footsteps made no noise. The rhythm of their own hearts had vanished. Even their breaths, once visible in the freezing air, no longer carried a sound. Charcoal tried to bark, but no sound came. His mouth opened wide, his chest heaved as he tried again, but nothing escaped. Ray turned, his lips moved as he called out their names. But no one heard. No echo, no whisper, not even the sound of emptiness itself. The silence was not merely an absence of sound, it was an entity, a force that fed on their minds. If they remained still, it would seep into them, crawling into the crevices of their thoughts. It would consume them, strip them of their sense of self, make them forget who they were. The shadows beneath the ice stirred. Something was moving, something inching closer with each passing second. And in this silence, it whispered into their minds, stealing their thoughts away. They had to find a way to communicate. They had to rely on trust, on understanding. They had to survive. If you scream, you will be lost forever. Beneath the frozen ocean, the unseen things waited. The silence still endured. The world remained devoid of sound. No footsteps echoed across the ice. No breath stirred the air. No rustling of fabric, no whisper of the unseen wind. Everything was swallowed in absolute stillness. And in that silence, the white mist began to shift. It was not merely mist of wind and snow, but something alive, something with intent. It moved slowly, deliberately, like unseen hands reaching out, brushing over them, veiling their eyes. And then, the illusions were born. Ray, the shadow of an unreachable past. He stood amidst ruins, ruins he knew too well. Scattered bricks, stone blackened by fire, the remnants of a world shattered beyond repair. The sky above was a muted gray, drained of color. The sunlight, weak and dying, cast a pale, hopeless glow upon the destruction below, as though even the heavens themselves were fading. And there, in the center of it all, a boy stood alone, small, trembling, eyes wide with fear. "No," Ray murmured, already knowing what would come next. The child reached out. His lips moved, calling Ray's name, but no sound came. Even his voice had been stolen by the ocean of silence, and behind him, the darkness crept closer. It was a shapeless entity, cold, formless, devouring all light. A living void forged from everything Ray feared most. He stepped forward, stretching out his hand. He had to save him, but the moment his fingers brushed against the boy's skin, he crumbled into ash. White dust scattered into the air, dissolving soundlessly into the eternal stillness. Ray grasped at nothing. Again and again. No screams, no cries, just the cruel, suffocating silence and the pain of an unchangeable past. Myst, a curse that cannot be broken. She was in the forest, a forest she knew far too well. Towering trees loomed overhead, their bark blackened, twisted by unseen magic. Moonlight shimmered through the dense canopy, casting eerie silver beams upon the tangled roots, roots that bound her like chains of fate. She moved forward, following a path she had walked countless times, and in the heart of the forest, she saw herself. A panther-like creature stood before her, its sleek black fur glistening like the midnight sky. Violet eyes glowed coldly beneath the moon's light. It did not move. It did not speak. It only watched. Myst knew this moment, The moment she had been cursed, the moment she had been exiled, she heard the echoes of those who had once begged for her aid, the voice of a lost child, the desperate pleas of those she once loved. Yet she had been powerless. She lifted a hand, reaching for the shadow of her past. But the panther only stared back, empty and unfeeling. No one could save her, not even herself. Luna. Flames of defeat. She stood atop a high ridge, overlooking the valley of her homeland. And below her, it burned. Fire. Flames of crimson and gold devoured everything in sight. Thick, black smoke rose, blotting out the sky. There had once been voices, screams, cries of agony. But now, there was nothing. She saw them, her kin, her people, struggling, fighting, reaching for salvation. They were calling for her. But she could not move. Her legs felt as though they had been chained to the earth, heavy as stone. She tried to step forward, to throw herself into the inferno to save them, but her body moved in reverse. The fire climbed higher. She watched helplessly as it consumed them all. She could do nothing. She could only watch, as everything fell apart before her eyes. Charcoal. The shadow that does not exist. Silence. Emptiness. Nothing to hold on to. He stood in an ocean of nothingness. The mist swirled around him, thick and impenetrable. No light, no sound, no presence. It was as if the entire world had ceased to be, leaving him stranded in an endless void. He turned left. Nothing. He turned right. Only the same abyss. His fur bristled. His body trembled. Not from cold, from fear. He pressed his paws against the icy ground, taking a step forward. But it felt like nothing changed, as if he had never moved at all, like the world beneath him had no beginning, and no end. He turned back, but there was no trace of the path he had come from, no footprints, no shadow. He tried to sniff the air, tried to listen, tried to see something, anything, but there was only void. No scent of Ray, no trace of Myst, no sign of Luna. They were gone. Or was it him who had disappeared? "Where am I?" His voice rang out into the mist. But it did not echo. No reply came. Not even the whisper of his own voice. He looked down at his paws. But the light swallowed them whole. Slowly, his body was fading. Was he ever truly there? The thought struck him like a lightning bolt. A deep, chilling dread slithered down his spine. His heartbeat quickened. But even that made no sound. He tried to cry out, "Ray! Myst! Luna!" But nothing. Did they hear him? Were they even still there? Or had he been severed from the world, forever? He stepped back. Or was it forward? He no longer knew. Everything blurred. Direction, meaning, existence. The world he had known, the warmth, the laughter, the voices of those who loved him. Where was it now? Had it ever been real? And if he had no past, no shadow, no presence, then who was he? His paws trembled. His tail, once full of life, hung still, uncertain. The silence wrapped around him, not just silence, a force that consumed everything. It was eating away at his identity, devouring his memories, stealing the very essence of what made him him. He took a breath, but felt nothing. He exhaled. But no mist formed in the cold air. Did his body still exist, or was he already fading away? This was his trial. Not an illusion of the past, not a vision of failure, but absolute emptiness. For if he had no shadow, no past, no reflection, was he still himself? If the world forgot him, if no one remembered his name, if he had no history, no future, was he still charcoal? The silence drew closer, and he was disappearing. The mist of forgetting. these illusions, they were not just memories, they were shadows that consumed the mind. The mist thickened, winding around their bodies. It did not just blind them, it seeped into their very souls. They began to forget who they were, why they had come. Ray, who could protect no one. Myst, forever bound in chains. Luna, powerless to stop destruction. Charcoal, without a past, without a shadow, without an identity. The mist swallowed them. It tore them apart. No one could call out. No one could hear. And in the unending silence, they were vanishing. Forever. The mist descends. The world was swallowed by the pale mist, thickening with every breath, curling around them like unseen hands tightening their grip. Light faded. Sound vanished. And they were torn apart. Ray, the mist of fear. He ran. His feet struck the frozen ground, but no sound followed. No footprints remained behind him. Only the shifting mist, creeping closer, as if reaching to consume him whole. "Myst! Luna! Charcoal!" he shouted. But his voice vanished into the air, swallowed, erased, as if it had never existed. No answer came, only his own breath, heavy and unsteady, and the pounding of his heart growing faster with unease. He turned in every direction, but all he found was emptiness. Then, from the silence, a shadow emerged. It had no face, no distinct form, but its eyes were the same as his own. The shadow stepped closer. "You can't save them," a voice whispered, soft, yet sharp. It did not come from outside, but from within, the deepest depths of his mind. Ray clenched his fists. "No. I must protect them." The shadow only laughed. A hollow, empty sound, like wind rustling through the ashes of what once was. Myst. The path without end. She walked. The mist twisted and turned, shifting like a living labyrinth. Every step felt like a cycle, leading her back to the same place. No beginning, no end. She raised her hand to cast a spell, but nothing responded. The energy that had always flowed within her was gone. A shiver crawled through her bones. Then the whispers came. The voice of the forest that had once imprisoned her. The voice of the past, whispering from the mist. "You will never be free." She clenched her jaw, her hands curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. She would not surrender to this. Luna, the cage of despair. She tried to run, but the deeper she moved, the heavier her steps became, as if invisible chains were binding her, dragging her down. "No," she swallowed hard. "I have to get out. I have to help them." But then the mist shifted, and the flames returned, her homeland, burning. She stood in the suffocating smoke, yet she could feel its heat searing her skin. The acrid scent of ash filled the air, the screams of her kin, once deafening, now distant, fading. No matter how she ran, how she reached out, the distance between her and them only grew. Her hands trembled, her ears rang. She was sinking. Charcoal. Facing his own shadow. He stood alone. No voices, no warmth, no direction. He tried to bark. Nothing came out. His tail, once full of life, hung still. His paws trembled as he turned left, then right. Nothing. Only the void. And then a voice rose from the mist. It was his own, but it wasn't him. "You are too weak." His ears perked, his body stiffened. He turned toward the voice. And there, stepping out from the mist, a shadow of himself, but its eyes were not golden like his. They were red, burning like embers, alight with something ancient and deep. "You can't protect them," the shadow spoke, voice laced with icy certainty. You have no power. You're just a small, helpless pup. Charcoal took a step back, his tail curled inward. His paws felt heavy, as if rooted to the frozen ground. No, The shadow stepped closer, eyes gleaming. You already know the truth. The voice deepened, reverberating like an echo from the abyss. They don't need you. Charcoal's breath hitched. His heart pounded. His own shadow was devouring him. Dark mist coiled around his limbs, tendrils of shadow snaking up his legs, constricting, pulling him down. It was cold, it was heavy, and it was swallowing him whole. The darkness closes in. They were falling, separated completely, their voices lost, their worlds torn apart. The mist thickened, burying them beneath its endless, suffocating weight, and in that vast, hollow silence, Charcoal stood at the edge of a choice, to surrender or to fight against the shadow within. The black mist pressed down, cold, heavy, almost alive. And from that abyss, it stepped forth. His own shadow. It loomed taller than Charcoal, its form more powerful, exuding the presence of a predator that knew no fear. Its pitch-black fur was darker than the mist itself, absorbing the surrounding light. And its eyes. They burned with a crimson glow, like embers of despair. Eyes that reflected the deepest depths of his soul. It was not merely a reflection, it was the whispered voice of darkness, the hidden fears he had buried deep within himself. You feel weak, don't you? Its voice was low, smooth, yet carried a chilling weight that was impossible to ignore. Charcoal took a step back, his tail lowering slightly. His fur bristled on instinct. His heart pounded, not from the cold but from the presence before him. The shadow stepped closer, mist swirling at its feet, as if the very world bowed to its existence. You seek power, don't you? It leaned down, those glowing red eyes piercing through him. If you accept me, I will give you strength. Strength to protect everyone. The words dug deep into Charcoal's mind. Everything it said was true. He was weak. He had failed to protect anyone. He couldn't fight against the power of this mist. If only he had more strength. He could save Ray. He could save Myst. He could save Luna. Couldn't he? His paws trembled slightly. His thoughts spiraled. The shadow took another step forward. All you need to do is let me consume your mind. I will make you strong. Its voice slithered into him like a spell woven into the mist. The darkness wrapped around him, inching closer, tendrils of shadow coiling around his body like vines ready to ensnare their prey. How easy it would be to surrender, to stop struggling. The shadow loomed closer, its presence suffocating. The mist thickened, tightening its grip on him. His heartbeat pounded in his chest. Then, a memory surfaced. Ray. The young man who had faced darkness without letting it consume him. He remembered Ray's unwavering determination, his refusal to surrender no matter how hopeless the path seemed. Myst, the proud, enigmatic warrior who had fought against fate itself, bound by a curse, trapped in chains, yet she never allowed her past to define her. Luna, the fierce and cunning huntress who never allowed fear to shackle her. Even when the flames of her past threatened to devour her whole, she chose to keep moving forward. They had all fought against their own darkness. Then what about him? Would he give in so easily? Would he let this shadow decide who he was? Would he become just another fragment of this mist? The shadow smirked. A smile filled with amusement, with dominance. You already know, it whispered, voice like frozen steel. I am part of you. No light exists without shadow. No heart exists without fear. Accept me, and you will never be weak again. Its voice sank into his soul, heavy with authority. The shadow extended its paw. Behind it, an abyss of infinite darkness. It was going to consume him, but at that moment, A voice rose within his heart, a voice deeper than the shadow's whispers, a voice stronger than the mist. His own voice. His golden eyes widened, light flickering within them, his lips curled back, fangs bared. A deep, defiant growl rumbled from his throat, rising into a thunderous roar that shattered the silence. My strength comes from my own heart. Boom! A brilliant blue light erupted from his body, wild, untamed, and pure. It was not power taken from the shadow. It was power that had always been within him. The power of unwavering courage, not born from fear, not born from despair, but from the fire of determination. The black mist that had coiled around him exploded apart. The shadow recoiled, its crimson eyes flashing with something it had never shown before. Fear. Impossible! The force of charcoal's light sent it staggering backward. It tried to resist, to hold its ground, but against this power it could not stand. The mist shattered around him, splintering into fragments of vanishing darkness. Yet the shadow did not disappear. It still remained, watching him, but it no longer controlled him. Charcoal had awakened his true strength. He no longer needed the darkness to define his path. He did not need to take power at the cost of his soul. He had already made his choice. He would be his own light. He would protect his friends, not with the power of shadows, but with the power that had always been his own. The mist tore apart, like a storm had ripped through it, scattering it into nothingness, and in the midst of that radiant blue glow, a path appeared, the path he would take, the path he would forge, with his own strength. The cursed ice ocean trembled, and for the first time, the light of a true guardian shone. The darkness that once shackled them was torn apart. The silence that once swallowed the land was replaced by something greater. The sound of light, breaking free from the chains of eternal night. Charcoal stood amidst the remnants of the dissipated black mist, his breaths heavy. His body shimmered faintly, bathed in an ethereal glow. Not from himself, but from the celestial force that had begun to descend from the sky. Above him, the aurora borealis ignited the heavens. As if the ancient gods of the Arctic had answered his call, waves of shimmering green, blue, and violet surged across the sky, painting the celestial dome in hues unseen by mortal eyes. It moved like a living entity, weaving and twisting with grace, a flowing river of dreams cascading from the forbidden horizon. At times, it resembled a celestial dragon soaring through the firmament. At others, it was a tapestry of cosmic silk, unraveling the secrets of a forgotten world. The aurora's light cascaded onto the frozen expanse below, casting a crystalline brilliance upon the ice. The once lifeless glaciers now reflected the celestial dance above, glittering like diamonds adrift in the abyss of the Arctic night. And then a roar shattered the sky. It was not the howling wind, not the groan of shifting glaciers, but something ancient, something primordial. The cry of the polar wolf, a sound from an era long buried beneath time, a voice of the frozen land itself, answering the call of destiny. The ground trembled beneath them. The black mist that had ensnared them dissolved in an instant. The world, once veiled in eternal dusk, was reborn into its purest form. Snow began to fall, but this was no ordinary snowfall. Each flake shimmered as it descended, glowing faintly like enchanted petals drifting through the air. They swirled in a slow, deliberate waltz, gracing the land as if bestowing a silent blessing upon the worthy. The guardian of ice opened his eyes. He gazed at Charcoal, his piercing blue eyes filled with something unfamiliar, pride and satisfaction. You have proven yourself. His voice was neither loud nor forceful, yet it echoed across the frozen expanse, carrying the quiet authority of the Arctic itself. Before them, something began to glow. The gem of the northern pole. It was no ordinary jewel. It was the very essence of the Arctic itself, a radiant crystal forged by the endless winter of 1,000 years. Suspended above an ancient ice altar, it pulsed with a steady, otherworldly glow. Its luminescence was neither harsh nor blinding, but a soft, radiant shimmer, a fragment of a frozen cosmos, sculpted by the gods of the winter sky. Inside the gem, a spiraling vortex of icy wind churned, a never-ending dance of storm and silence. But then, the ice beneath them shuddered. A fracture splintered across the frozen ground, sending a deep, resonant crack echoing through the land. Runes, long buried beneath the ice, began to surface, glowing with a silver light, an ancient script lost to time. The markings spread like veins of light, tracing an intricate path upon the ice, as though the very heartbeat of the Arctic had begun to stir once more. The air turned colder than ever before. But it was not the cold of mere winter, it was the cold of something awakening, something older than the guardian himself, something that had slumbered beneath the eternal sea of ice for millennia. The guardian of ice narrowed his gaze. He turned toward the distant horizon, his body motionless, yet his eyes deep with unspoken knowledge. "Its time has come." His voice was scarcely louder than a whisper, yet it resonated across the frozen vastness, reaching beyond the horizon to where the aurora still danced upon the sky. And as the celestial lights continued their ethereal waltz, a colossal shadow stirred beneath the ice. A low, guttural rumble arose from the abyss. The once frozen surface of the ocean began to fracture, as something vast, something unseen, began to rise from the depths. Something was waking, something that had been imprisoned for eons, something forgotten by all but the oldest whispers of the world, and under the radiant veil of the northern lights, the Arctic was about to enter a new era, an era where the clash of light and darkness was about to begin once more. The veil of darkness was torn apart. The once raging storm had stilled. Only silence remained, a silence too deep, too unnatural, as if the frozen ocean itself was holding its breath. And in that eerie stillness, it appeared. The gem of the northern pole. It hovered above the ancient, fractured ice altar, suspended in mid-air. A luminous beacon, pulsating with an ethereal glow, flickering like flames caught in a blizzard. But this was no mere gemstone. This was the heart of the Arctic, the very essence of an eternal winter forged by time itself, a force not merely of ice and snow, but of the world's perpetual cycle, of power that had slumbered for millennia, now awakened once more. The gem radiated in the hues of the northern lights, the deep blue of the Arctic Ocean, the shimmering green of the aurora that danced above, the silver brilliance of the first snow of winter. Its light did not merely shine, it sang. A whispering melody echoed in the air, reverberating like the voice of the world itself, awakening something long forgotten. It was not the voice of man, nor the call of beasts. It was a resonance from the very fabric of time. The ice began to melt, not in the slow, gentle way of snow under sunlight, but in the violent rupture of shackles breaking free. The frozen prison that had stood for centuries began to shatter. A ghostly glow flickered beneath the ice, pulsing like the heartbeat of something trapped within. And from the cracks, shadows began to stir. Not shadows of the living, but spirits long confined within the frozen depths. Some were the remnants of ancient guardians, beasts who once roamed this land, sworn protectors of the Arctic. Some were the echoes of lost wanderers, souls who had strayed too far into this unforgiving realm, never to return. And some were things that should have never been released. A tremor shook the frozen land. The first fracture appeared. The ice cracked, not as a mere wound upon the surface, but as a rift in reality itself. The ground groaned, splitting apart with veins of silver light, as if lightning had been carved into the very bones of the world. Above, the northern lights blazed. The aurora continued its celestial dance, but now it was more than a spectacle of beauty. It was a warning. The colors deepened, intensifying, the hues of green and blue surging like flames across the heavens. It twisted and coiled, as though some unseen force was whispering through its light, a force responding to the stirring power of the land below. But the northern lights were not just a symbol of splendor. Tonight, they were a herald of what was to come. Then came the sound, a deep, resounding roar from beneath the sea of ice. Not the sound of glaciers fracturing, not the howl of the polar winds, but something older, something that had been forgotten. The ice trembled, the earth quaked beneath their feet, the cracks widened, the abyss grew deeper. A bone-chilling wind swept across the tundra, cutting through flesh and spirit alike. This was not the cold of winter, nor the bite of Arctic frost. This was the breath of something ancient, something that should have remained buried beneath the frozen waves. The ice was no longer merely breaking. It was opening, a gateway long sealed, a prison long untouched, and from beneath the abyss, something was awakening. The guardian of ice stood still, his gaze deepened, fixed upon the growing fissure in the ice. A look not of surprise but of recognition, as if he had foreseen this moment long ago. He did not speak, for no words were needed. They all understood. Something that had been imprisoned for eons was about to be set free. A low growl rose from beneath the ice. It was not the cry of the Arctic wolves, not the call of the storm, but something far older, a sound that resonated from the very bones of the earth, a voice that had once ruled this frozen land, now waking from its slumber. The ice splintered further. A deep, pulsating black light seeped through the cracks like a storm of shadows rising from the abyss. A colossal figure shifted beneath the frozen surface, and as the northern lights shimmered above, the Arctic stood upon the threshold of a new age, an age where light and shadow would once again collide. The frozen ocean would never be silent again, and the shadow of something long forgotten was about to rise once more. A faint cracking sound echoed through the frozen expanse, soft at first, then growing, spreading, deepening. This was no mere shifting of glaciers, no whisper of wind against the tundra. It was the sound of the world changing. Beneath the silent frozen ocean, something moved. They all felt it. A chill unlike any other seeped into their very bones, not from the Arctic cold, but from the presence of something long imprisoned. Ray, Myst, Luna, and Charcoal stood before the ancient ice altar. A strange energy pulsed through the air, pressing against them like an unseen force, heavy and unrelenting. They did not know what lay beneath them, but they knew one thing. It was alive. A roar from the abyss. A low, guttural sound rose from the depths, reverberating through the frozen sea, a sound deeper than the oldest storms, heavier than any beast's cry. It was not the voice of wind, nor of ice, but the voice of something older than time itself. "You have awakened something that should have remained asleep." Ray's brow furrowed, his instincts screaming as his hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. Myst clenched her fists, her violet eyes gleaming with caution. Luna's emerald gaze locked onto the widening cracks, her tail flicking as she whispered, "Something is coming." Charcoal bared his fangs, his growl a low rumble against the unnatural silence. They could all feel it. Something was watching them from below. The gem of the ocean's soul. The ancient ice altar, once frozen in time, began to glow. A radiant blue light pulsed from its core, etching glowing symbols across the ice, as if carved by the hands of a forgotten deity. And from that luminous cradle, it emerged. The gem of the ocean's soul. Suspended above the altar, it shimmered with a light unlike any they had seen. Not warm, not harsh, but a spectral glow, cold and enigmatic, like the reflection of the moon upon an eternal sea. Within its crystalline depths, something moved, a vortex of dark currents, swirling endlessly, as if the ocean itself had been sealed inside this single stone. It was not merely a relic. It was the heart of the abyss, the force that governed the tides, a power no mortal should ever wield. Ray gazed at it warily, before turning to the Guardian of Ice. "What is this?" The Guardian's deep blue eyes shimmered with knowledge and caution. "It is the key of the ocean. The weight of the ocean's will." Myst's voice was steady, yet edged with suspicion. "A key? To what?" The Guardian was silent for a moment before he spoke, and when he did, his words carried the weight of ancient wisdom. "It is both a blessing and a curse. It commands the tides. It controls the flow of the sea itself, but it also serves as a seal, a prison for something that must never be freed." The words lingered, heavier than the ice beneath their feet, and then the ocean answered. The ice beneath them shuddered violently. The cracks, thin as fractures in glass, suddenly spread, a web of fissures splitting apart the frozen world with jagged silver veins. Something beneath the surface was stirring. It was waiting. The choice that cannot be undone. A deathly stillness fell over them. Even the wind dared not move. Luna's ears twitched. Her pupils shrank to slits. "I can feel it. Its power is too strong." Charcoal's stance tensed, his heart pounding against his ribs. What do we do? They had to choose. To take the gem. To unleash whatever had been bound to it, to face the unknown terror that lurked beneath the ice. Or to leave it undisturbed. To let it remain hidden in time's embrace, and pray that no other hands would ever claim it. Another tremor shook the ground. The roar from the abyss deepened, rising from the depths with a power that made the air itself tremble. The very ocean was listening, waiting for their answer. A path with no return. Ray tightened his grip on his sword. "If we take it, what happens?" Myst's voice was quiet. "We don't know, but something tells me it won't be good." Luna's tail lashed. "And if we do nothing? Do we just leave it here?" Charcoal stepped forward, his paws pressing against the trembling ice. His golden eyes burned with resolve. "We have to decide." Above them the aurora danced, its green and blue flames flickering as if the heavens themselves were watching. Whatever path they chose, the world would never be the same again. Tonight, the sky was devoid of stars. The heavens were a void of ink-black darkness, as if the universe itself had recoiled into an abyss. No light pierced the endless night, except for the eerie blue glow of the gem of the ocean's soul, still floating above the ancient stone altar. It was beautiful, too beautiful to be a mere crystal. But they all knew. Beneath that beauty lurked something dangerous. "Are we really taking this?" Myst whispered, her violet eyes flickering with unease as they reflected the gem's light. Luna stepped closer, her emerald gaze filled with caution. "It might be what we came for, but something about this feels wrong." Charcoal stood beside Ray, his ears twitching, tail lowered. He didn't need words to explain it. He could feel it. The weight of something unseen. Not the mere pressure of this frozen realm, but the pulse of the gem itself, steady, alive, waiting. "We don't have a choice," Ray finally spoke, his voice firm. "We've come too far to turn back. If this is the key we've been searching for, then we can't let it fall into the wrong hands." No one answered. They exchanged glances, hesitation thick in the air. But in that fleeting moment, the decision had already been made. Ray reached out, his fingertips brushed against the gem's cold, smooth surface, and the instant he lifted it from the stone, crack! A deafening explosion of magic erupted around them. Silver runes carved into the stone blazed to life, their glow almost blinding. Like a chain breaking, Like a barrier shattering, something ancient had been unleashed. A powerful gust howled through the chamber, a force so violent it felt like the breath of an unseen storm. Beneath their feet, the ice began to shake. And from the abyss below, a roar erupted. Not a mere sound, but a rageful cry from the depths of time itself. The ice cracked. One fissure turned into 100. The fractures spread like veins across the frozen world, as if unseen hands were tearing apart the earth itself. And from the silence, a roar shattered the void, a sound no human had ever heard, a sound older than time, a sound that was the breath of the world itself. "You have awakened me." The ground trembled as though the planet itself had begun to wail. The cracks widened into jagged chasms, swallowing the ice beneath them. One by one, massive ice plates collapsed, plunging into the abyss. And then, a colossal shadow rose from the darkness. It ascended from the depths of the frozen sea, a monstrous being forged from ancient ice that had never melted. Thick glacial armor covered its body, as if it was not merely a creature, but a part of the Arctic itself. Pale, milky eyes flickered open, holding no warmth, only the hatred of centuries spent in chains. The Ice Titan, the gatekeeper of the pole. This was the guardian of the gem, a being that was never meant to awaken again. "We have to get out of here, now!" Ray shouted. His voice was nearly drowned beneath the Titan's roar, a sound that shook the very fabric of reality. "I'll open a portal," Myst declared, her amethyst eyes blazing with urgency. She raised her hands, tracing symbols into the air. Magic spiraled around her, a vortex of violet light tearing through the icy air. But the world was collapsing faster than she could weave the spell. Boom! The altar crumbled. A massive rift split open beneath them, swallowing ice and stone alike. "Hurry, Myst!" Luna yowled, her claws gripping the ice as it trembled beneath her. "I'm trying!" Myst gritted her teeth, focusing despite the storm of chaos. The portal's shimmering outline began to solidify, its violet glow stretching into an escape. And then, the Titan's eyes locked onto them. A slow, bone-chilling exhale escaped its maw, the breath of something not living, but never truly dead. A blizzard roared to life, sweeping across the battlefield, swallowing the ground, devouring everything in its path. The Titan moved. Its massive body shifted, its hulking form casting a shadow over the dying landscape. "Go!" Myst screamed, slamming her palm against the air. The portal flared open. "Don't stop! Jump!" Ray bellowed. One by one, they dived into the portal, escaping just as the Titan lifted its arms to strike. And the moment Myst vanished through the gate, boom! The portal sealed shut, severing their connection to that doomed world. The Titan's final roar was cut short, swallowed by silence. For a long moment, there was nothing but the pounding of their own hearts, the echoes of their own ragged breaths. Then, their bodies hit solid ground. They tumbled onto the deck of the Etherian, the ship rocking gently beneath them. Cool, salty air brushed against their skin. It was over. For now. "We made it," Charcoal whispered, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The ocean stretched around them, peaceful and still. A stark contrast to the frozen wasteland they had just escaped, but within their hearts, the Titan's roar still lingered. Myst turned her gaze toward the gem, still clutched tightly in Ray's hand. Her fingers trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what they had done. "We escaped," she murmured, her voice distant. "But we need to understand something." She paused, then spoke the words that none of them wanted to hear. "What we stole is not just a gem." Ray tightened his grip around it. "Then what is it?" Myst exhaled. Her eyes drifted to the endless horizon, where the sea met the sky. "It is the key to something far greater." A silence fell over them. Even the waves seemed hesitant to break it. And deep within that silence, they all knew. It wasn't over. The Ice Titan wasn't gone. It was only waking. The storm had passed, but the true storm had yet to come. Far beyond the horizon, hidden within the depths of time, the secrets of the frozen ocean still awaited them, and their journey had only just begun. If you had fun hanging out with me, Charcoal, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's make more pawsome memories together. See you in the next adventure. Stay positive.